Ethan leaned back in his chair during the reading of the will, convinced I would leave with nothing. My ex-wife's fortune, worth $40 million, was supposed to be his alone. He grinned at the lawyer, waiting for his moment of triumph. But when one short line was read aloud, his confidence shattered and the room erupted. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if your own son tried to erase you from everything, only to be crushed by one final twist? The mug slid from my hand and hit the kitchen tiles with a crack that sent shards skittering in every direction. Hot coffee spread in a jagged circle, darkening the floor as if it wanted to stain the entire room. I muttered under my breath and reached for a rag. But before I could kneel down, Margaret Doyle's voice rang out through the wall. "Your sprinklers are drowning my roses again, David. Do you even care what you are doing to my garden?" I closed my eyes. Same argument, different morning. Margaret had been my neighbor for 7 years, and I could not remember a single week without her shouting. 65 years old, back aching, knees stiff, and I was still cleaning up messes and apologizing for things that were never entirely my fault. I pressed the rag against the spreading puddle, feeling the damp seep into my hand as Margaret continued. "This is lowering property values. Someone needs to teach you responsibility." I wanted to shout back that the sprinkler system was temporary, that the faulty joint was already scheduled to be replaced, but there was no point. Margaret never wanted answers. She wanted to hear herself scold. The phone began ringing in the middle of her tirade. At first I let it ring, expecting the machine to pick up, but the sound cut through her voice like a blade. It rang again. On the 5th ring I stood, tossed the rag into the sink, and grabbed the receiver. "David Harris speaking." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and deliberate. "Mr. Harris, this is Richard Cole from Cole & Associates, Fort Collins. I am calling about Mrs. Clara Harris." My stomach tightened instantly. It had been years since anyone said her name to me in full, and hearing it now felt like reopening a scar I had worked hard to cover. My ex-wife, the woman I had once sworn my life to, who had walked away with everything except my memories. I hesitated before speaking. "What about her?" There was a pause, just long enough to let dread settle deep into my bones. Then Richard spoke again, voice steady, carrying that tone I knew only came with bad news. "I am sorry to inform you that Mrs. Harris passed away on Tuesday evening. The funeral will be held Friday at Evergreen Memorial Chapel." The words hit harder than any fall, harder than any fist. My grip on the receiver loosened, and I sat down heavily in the chair by the window. Tuesday evening. That was 3 days ago. 3 days I had spent worrying about sprinklers and coffee stains, while the woman who had once promised me forever was lowered into silence. The room seemed to grow smaller, the ticking of the wall clock impossibly loud. "Mr. Harris, are you still there?" "Yes," I said, though it sounded strange in my own ears, like someone else had spoken it. "I understand this is difficult. I am calling because you have been named as a beneficiary in Mrs. Harris's will. The reading will be held after the service. Your presence is required." Beneficiary? The word tasted foreign. Clara and I had divorced more than a decade ago. After that, she built an empire from the ground up, her consulting firm growing until her name appeared in business magazines and financial journals. She had become a figure in boardrooms where I had no seat. By the end, her wealth was estimated at $40 million. That was a number I could not even wrap my head around. What could she possibly have left for me? Richard's voice remained measured. Yes, Mr. Harris. You are named directly in the documents. It is important that you attend. Through the window, I could see Margaret Doyle standing at the fence, still wagging a finger in my direction. Her lips moved, her voice muffled now by the weight of Richard's words. Her complaints belonged to another world. My hand trembled slightly as I held the receiver tighter. Clara. The name echoed inside me like a bell tolling in an empty church. Clara, who had loved me once, who had chosen ambition over marriage, who had turned our son into a stranger. Clara, who had walked away with the life we had built and turned it into something larger than I could ever have imagined. And now, even in death, she had reached back into my life, forcing me to step into a room I had never expected to see again. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, the question tearing its way out before I could stop it. Why would Clara leave me anything? The question kept circling in my mind long after the phone call ended. My apartment was quiet. The kind of quiet that lets old ghosts step forward whether you want them to or not. I stared at the kitchen table, at the jagged ring of coffee stains drying into the wood. And without meaning to, I slipped backward into memories I had tried to bury. Memories of a time when Clara was not an untouchable figure worth $40 million, but a woman in a red coat who had walked into a diner one winter night and changed everything. It was February, 1988. Snow had been falling all day, soft and relentless, blanketing Fort Collins until the roads turned slick and the street lamps glowed in a haze of white. I had ducked into Murphy's diner, mostly to get warm. My gloves were damp, my jacket thin, and I wanted a cheap meal before heading back to my small apartment. The place was nearly empty, the kind of quiet night where the only sound came from the jukebox, humming a tune nobody paid for. I was halfway through a slice of apple pie when her voice cut through the stillness. You mean to tell me you are not hiring women because we cannot handle pressure? That is the most backward thing I have heard all week. I turned my head and saw her at the counter, facing down the manager. Her dark hair framed sharp cheekbones, her jaw set with a determination that made the whole place lean toward her. She wore a red wool coat, snow melting into the shoulders, but her presence burned hotter than the steam from the kitchen. The manager stammered, "Ma'am, I did not mean any offense." "Of course you meant offense," she shot back. "You just did not expect anyone to call you on it. Here is my card. Call me when you are ready to hire based on qualifications instead of prejudice." She slid a small rectangle across the counter, then turned and walked out. The diner felt smaller after she left, drained of air. I stood, left a $5 bill beside my half-eaten pie, and followed her with my eyes through the window as she climbed into a blue Honda. She checked her mirrors twice before pulling into traffic, careful and deliberate. "That one is trouble," the manager muttered. "No," I said without thinking. "That one is extraordinary." I memorized the phone number on the abandoned card before I stepped into the cold night. It took me 3 days to dial it. My hand shook the whole time, but when she answered, her voice was brisk, confident. "Clara Chen speaking." "This is David Harris," I said. "You do not know me, but I was at Murphy's diner Friday night." There was a pause, then a chuckle. The man with the pie, the one who said I was extraordinary. Heat rushed to my face. "You heard that?" "I was getting my gloves from the car. You left a big tip, too." Her voice softened, amused. "So, David Harris, what can I do for you?" "Dinner," I blurted. "With me. Somewhere better than Murphy's." She laughed, not the polite kind people use to fill silence, but a laugh that carried warmth and confidence. "Are you asking me on a date, or do you need business consulting?" Definitely a date. But if you have advice about convincing remarkable women to say yes, I could use that too. Another pause then. Saturday. Romano's on 3rd Street, 7 o'clock. I had never run home so fast to find a decent shirt. She showed up in the same red coat, but beneath it was a black dress that made my throat go dry. We talked for 3 hours. About books, about movies, about her childhood in California, and my steady job at the power plant. She laughed at my story about flooding my apartment trying to fix a leaky faucet. And in that laugh, I felt myself falling. 6 months later, I proposed at the same diner where I had first seen her challenge the manager. I slid a small ring across the counter and asked her to make me the luckiest man in Colorado. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. Our wedding was held on a golden September afternoon. Clara wore her grandmother's dress, altered to fit her frame, and carried wildflowers we had picked that morning. My hands shook as I slipped the ring onto her finger, and when she whispered, "Forever," I believed her with every fiber of my being. Life started simply. A rented apartment, shared grocery bills, evenings filled with laughter and arguments over whose turn it was to do the dishes. Money was tight, but love filled the gaps. When Ethan was born 2 years later, everything shifted. I can still see Clara in the hospital bed, sweat on her forehead, hair plastered to her cheeks, holding that small red-faced miracle as if she had conquered the world. I remember thinking that this moment, this family, was all I would ever need. For a while it was good. We lived in a small house with a creaky porch, the kind where the floorboards remembered every step. Ethan's laughter filled every corner, his little hands smudging walls I never had time to repaint. I would come home from long shifts at the plant and find Clara in the rocking chair. Ethan nestled against her chest, her expression softer than the woman who once went to war with diner managers. But even in those early years, I noticed how her eyes would drift. While she cradled our son, a business magazine might sit nearby, pages dog-eared and underlined. When Ethan turned 7, she bought him a computer that cost more than a month of my wages. "He needs to understand technology," she said firmly. "The future belongs to children who can think digitally. Or maybe the future belongs to children who learn how to fish with their fathers." I replied, half joking, holding out a fishing rod I had bought secondhand. She laughed, but not kindly. As Ethan grew, so did the gap between us. Clara poured her energy into her consulting business, a venture that began in our kitchen but soon outgrew our lives. Clients called at all hours, deals closed over family dinners, and weekend trips were replaced with business conferences. I clung to the small things: Saturday pancakes, bedtime stories, the warmth of Ethan falling asleep against my shoulder. But Clara's gaze was fixed further ahead, on a horizon I could not see. One evening, as I watched Ethan playing on the glowing computer screen she had bought him, I said quietly, "Maybe he is too young for all this. Maybe he just needs to be a boy for a while." Clara's eyes flicked to me, sharp and unyielding. "Ethan is not going to grow up like you." Clara's words hung in the air long after she said them, sharp and final, like a door slamming shut. I remember staring at her, unable to answer, because somewhere deep down, I already knew she meant it. She had started building something I could not keep up with, and she had no intention of slowing down for me. Her consulting business, once just an idea scribbled in notebooks and whispered over late-night coffee, began to expand like wildfire. At first, it was one client, then 2, then entire companies reaching out to her for guidance. Our kitchen table turned into a makeshift office, papers stacked so high we could barely eat a meal there anymore. I told myself it was temporary, but it was not. Soon, she leased office space downtown, hired staff, and started dressing differently. Tailored blazers, sharp heels, jewelry that caught the light just enough to command attention. And with every step she took upward, our lives changed. The modest house we had bought after Ethan was born became too small in her eyes. "David, we need a space that reflects our success," she said one afternoon, her eyes glancing over the worn carpet and scuffed baseboards like they were stains on her reputation. Within weeks, we had signed papers on a larger house across town, one with 3 bathrooms, granite countertops, and a kitchen island that could have been mistaken for a small stage. The first time I walked into that house, I felt like a guest, not a husband or a father. Everything gleamed, polished and perfect, but there was no warmth in it. Our old dining table, scarred with Ethan's crayons and years of dinners, was replaced with a glossy surface that demanded coasters and placemats. Clara loved it. "Now we can entertain properly," she said, running her hand over the surface as if it were an award. I missed the little burns from hot pans and the ink stains that told the story of who we had been. Soon after, the entertaining began. Our home filled with people I did not know. Business associates, clients, couples whose conversations revolved around investment portfolios and quarterly growth. I stood among them in my best shirt, trying to contribute, but their words might as well have been a foreign language. Clara thrived in it, glowing in her element, her laughter louder, her smile sharper. When someone inevitably asked what I did, she would answer before I could. "David works at the power plant," she would say, and I caught something new in her tone. Not pride, but apology, as if my steady job were a flaw she had to excuse. Ethan, though. Ethan belonged in her world. At 10 years old, he could talk about computers with Clara's tech-savvy clients. At 12, he wrinkled his nose at restaurants I considered fancy, critiquing the wine list, though he was too young to drink. At 14, he rolled his eyes when I suggested a family camping trip, dismissing it with, "Dad, that is boring." He preferred traveling with Clara to conferences in Denver or Salt Lake, where he could shake hands with people twice his age and talk like he was already one of them. "Dad does not understand," he started saying, a phrase that stung every time it passed his lips. It was always accompanied by that sigh. The kind that told me my own son saw me as an obstacle, not a guide. The distance widened slowly, but once it was there, I could not close it. Clara fed his ambition, praising him for his cleverness, for his sophistication. She bought him suits before he was even out of middle school, taught him how to make eye contact during handshakes, how to speak with authority even when he was not sure of the subject. I tried to offer balance, teaching him how to change a tire, how to bait a hook, how to see value in small things. He had no interest. The first real fracture came on his 15th birthday. I had envisioned a backyard barbecue, simple food, friends from school, maybe a homemade cake like the ones my mother used to bake. Clara, on the other hand, planned something entirely different. Caterers, a guest list full of business connections, and their children, live entertainment. It looked less like a birthday party and more like a corporate gala. I stood in the kitchen the night before, watching staff arrange elaborate centerpieces, while Clara directed them with the precision of a general. "This is embarrassing," I told her quietly. "He is turning 15, not 50. She did not even look up from adjusting the flowers. "David, these connections matter. These people will shape his future. This is not about cake and balloons. It is about opportunity. What about just being a kid? Do you not think he deserves that?" My voice rose despite myself. That was when she finally looked at me, her eyes colder than I had ever seen them. Being just a kid is a luxury we cannot afford to give him. The world is competitive. Either we prepare him to win, or we prepare him to lose. Her words knocked the air out of me. I thought back to my own 15th birthday. Fishing with my father at the lake, a homemade cake on the kitchen table, presents wrapped in newspaper comics. Simple, perfect, enough. And now, here was my son, walking into a room lit like a ballroom, receiving gifts worth more than cars, shaking hands with adults who praised him for being so mature. The party was a triumph by Clara's standards. Ethan charmed the adults, accepted expensive gifts, and played the role she had crafted for him. But at one point, I caught him by the pool, standing alone, his shoulders slumped. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw not a polished young man, but a boy, lost and unsure. "You okay, buddy?" I asked softly. He straightened quickly, slipping the mask back on. "Of course, Dad. Why would I not be?" But the look in his eyes haunted me. I wanted to pull him away, to tell him he did not need to pretend. But before I could, Clara appeared at his side, steering him back toward the guests. That night, after the last guest left and the house fell quiet, I tried again. "Clara, this is not right. He is still a child. He deserves to laugh with his friends, not host dinner parties for your clients." Her expression hardened. She folded her arms and stared at me, her words clipped and final. "We are not a family anymore, David. We are a business arrangement." Those words marked the beginning of the end. I do not even remember what I said in response. I just remember the silence after, a silence so sharp it felt like it could cut skin. From that moment, I knew the woman I had married. The one in the red coat who once laughed freely was gone. What remained was someone whose love had been consumed by ambition. The divorce papers arrived weeks later, delivered in a thick envelope by a courier who barely looked at me. Clara's lawyers did not waste time. They came prepared with spreadsheets, valuations, and arguments that carved up 20 years of marriage like it was nothing more than a contract that had expired. I sat across from them in conference rooms that smelled of leather and ink, listening as they itemized every piece of our life together. Her legal team was relentless. Every asset we had shared was classified as hers, her business, her earnings, her investments. My steady wages from the power plant looked pitiful beside the numbers she had produced. When I tried to argue that marriage was more than income streams and ledgers, her lawyer smiled politely and turned another page. By the time it was done, I was left with the old rental property on Maple Street, a place we had once bought as an investment, but never updated. It needed repairs, the kind I could barely afford, and it sat on a street where the weeds grew faster than the city could mow them. Along with that, I received a modest settlement, just enough to live on if I was careful. Clara walked away with everything else. The worst part was not the money. It was Ethan. He was 16 by then, caught between childhood and manhood, and he made his choice without hesitation. He chose her. "Dad, you just do not get it," he told me, his tone sharp with a teenager's certainty. "Mom is building something incredible. She is a winner. You settled for small things." Small things. That was how he saw me. Fishing trips, family dinners, the steady paycheck that had kept the lights on and the fridge stocked. Small things. He looked at me as if I were holding him back, as if being his father was a flaw instead of a gift. I tried. God knows I tried. I invited him over on weekends, cooked his favorite meals, asked about school. He came a few times, sat at my table in silence, answered with shrugs. Then the visit stopped. When I called, he was always busy, Study groups, business trips with Clara, dinners with her associates. One evening, after my fourth unanswered call, he finally picked up and said, "Dad, stop. You are toxic. I cannot be around this negativity anymore." Then he hung up. That was the last real conversation we had. The years that followed blurred together. I worked at the plant until retirement, saved what little I could, and spent my evenings in the quiet house on Maple Street. I fixed what I could, ignored what I could not. My life became routines. Coffee in the morning, newspaper at the table, repairs that always seemed to outnumber my tools. I learned to live with silence, though sometimes it pressed so heavily on me that I thought it might crush my chest. Clara, on the other hand, became a name you could not escape. I saw her face on magazine covers at the grocery store, heard her quoted on business programs I never watched on purpose, but stumbled across while flipping channels. Clara Harris, founder and CEO, the captions always read. She was photographed in expensive suits, standing on stages, shaking hands with governors, even giving speeches about balancing work and family. I would laugh bitterly when I saw those words. What family? Not the one we had shared. Every headline reminded me of the chasm between us. She had built an empire worth tens of millions. I had patched leaks in a house that always smelled faintly of mildew, no matter how hard I scrubbed. People in town would whisper when they saw me. "That is Clara's ex-husband," I heard once at the hardware store. The man she had left behind. The years aged me quickly. My hair turned silver, my body stiffened. But the hurt never dulled. I told myself I had made peace with it, that I had survived worse things. But the truth was, I carried that wound every day. I carried it when I ate meals alone, when Christmas mornings passed without a phone call from Ethan, when birthdays came and went unacknowledged. Then, one gray afternoon, as I was stacking firewood behind the house, a letter arrived. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with elegant handwriting across the front. I carried it inside, sat at the table, and stared at it for a long time before I opened it. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. "David Harris," it began. "You are formally invited to attend the funeral service of Mrs. Clara Harris at Evergreen Memorial Chapel, Friday at 2 p.m. I read it twice, the words blurring. Clara was gone. Just like that. The woman who had once been my wife, who had turned into a stranger on magazine covers, who had ripped our family apart with her ambition, gone. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside. But before I could even decide what to do, the phone rang. I lifted it slowly, still gripping the invitation. It was Ethan. His voice was cold, clipped, every word sharpened like a blade. "Do not come." Ethan's words echoed in my ears long after the phone went dead. For 2 nights, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the invitation. I told myself it would be easier not to go, that Clara's world had not been mine for a very long time. Yet something inside me would not let me stay away. No matter how far we had drifted, no matter how bitter the ending had been, she had once been my wife. She had once whispered forever beneath September sunshine. I had to go. Not for recognition, not for appearances, but for respect. Friday arrived cold and gray, clouds sagging heavy with the threat of rain. I shaved carefully, pressed the only suit I still owned, and tightened a tie that felt like it was choking me. The drive to Evergreen Memorial Chapel took me through neighborhoods I hardly recognized anymore. Gleaming stone houses with manicured lawns, cars in driveways worth more than my entire home. Clara's world, a world where she had risen and I had remained behind. When I pulled into the chapel lot, I parked my faded sedan between a sleek Lexus and a black Cadillac. The contrast made me feel smaller than I already did. The chapel itself loomed above, its tall windows and dark wood beams whispering wealth and permanence. As I stepped out, the air was thick with expensive cologne and murmurs from men in tailored suits. I kept my head down, walking toward the heavy doors. Inside, the hush of gathered voices washed over me. At least 200 people filled the pews. I recognized some of them from years ago. Faces I had seen across Clara's dinner table, people who once asked about her business plans while barely acknowledging my presence. Now they looked at me with quiet curiosity, whispers following my steps. That is her ex-husband. Can you believe he showed up? After everything she went through with him? Their words pricked like needles, though I pretended not to hear. I slipped into a back pew, folding my hands in my lap, hoping to disappear into the crowd. I only wanted to sit in silence, to listen to the prayers, and to say goodbye in my own way. But then I heard my name, sharp, clear, cutting through the murmur like a blade. Dad. I looked up. Ethan was striding down the aisle, his face hard as stone. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than I had earned in a month, his hair perfectly styled, his watch gleaming beneath the chapel lights. At 37, he had inherited Clara's sharpness, her commanding presence, her ability to fill a room before she even spoke. "What are you doing here?" His voice carried across the pews, silencing the crowd. I rose slowly. "I came to pay my respects. You lost the right to do that years ago." He stepped closer, his jaw clenched tight. "She would not have wanted you here." "Maybe not," I admitted, keeping my tone low. "But I needed to be." "For what? To ease your conscience? To play the grieving husband in front of people who know exactly what kind of man you were?" The crowd had fallen completely silent now. 200 eyes were on us, and I could feel the judgment pressing down like a physical weight. Faces turned toward me, some frowning, some whispering to one another. A woman in black muttered, "Shameless," loud enough for me to hear. "I am not here to make claims," I said firmly, holding Ethan's gaze. "I am not here to cause trouble. I will sit quietly in the back, and when the service is over, I will leave." "You will leave now." His voice rose, carrying to every corner of the chapel. "You embarrassed her enough when she was alive. Do not humiliate her in death." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, heads nodding in agreement. The heat rose in my cheeks, but I stood my ground. "I am not leaving, Ethan. I loved your mother for more than 20 years. I will sit here and honor that. Nothing more." His eyes flashed, surprised that I had not backed down. For a moment he seemed caught off guard, but then his expression hardened again. He turned to the mourners, lifting his chin like a man addressing a jury. "For those who do not know," he said, his voice commanding, "this is David Harris, the man who spent 20 years holding my mother back. While she built an empire that gave hundreds of people jobs, he was content to punch a time clock and drag her down with his mediocrity." I felt the words hit me like stones. People nodded, whispered, and I saw their eyes shift toward me with disdain. He was painting the story in broad strokes, making me the villain, and none of them cared for nuance. "Ethan, that is enough," I said, louder this time. He ignored me. He took half her assets in the divorce despite contributing nothing. He spent years pretending to be a victim while she worked night and day to achieve greatness. And now that she is gone, he shows up expecting sympathy, expecting recognition. I clenched my fists at my sides. I wanted to tell them the truth, that I had sacrificed in quiet ways, that I had kept the lights on while she built her empire, that I had begged her to remember family before ambition swallowed us whole. But what was the point? They had chosen their story long ago. "I am not here for recognition," I said at last, my voice carrying steady through the silence. "I am here because once upon a time, your mother and I made promises to each other. Promises that mattered. I am here to honor that memory." I sat back down, my hands trembling in my lap. Around me, the silence stretched, uncomfortable and heavy. Ethan stood frozen, perhaps not expecting resistance. His jaw twitched, but before he could speak again, a calm voice came from behind him. "Gentlemen." Richard Cole, the attorney, was walking toward us. His black suit immaculate, his expression professional but firm. He placed a hand lightly on Ethan's shoulder, then looked at me. "This is neither the time nor the place. We will address matters shortly." Ethan's lips curled into a scowl. "There are no matters to address. He does not belong here." Richard's eyes flicked between us. Then he spoke with measured precision, his voice carrying just enough to silence the whispers around us. "Both of you must attend the will reading." Richard Cole's words settled over the chapel like dust after a storm. Ethan's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching in his cheek. But he said nothing more. The crowd shifted, whispers rising again. But the moment had passed. The service began, and I stayed where I was, silent and still, staring at the back of Ethan's perfectly tailored suit, while memories of Clara played in my mind like an old reel I could not shut off. After the last hymn faded and mourners began filing out, Richard approached us once more. "Gentlemen, if you would, my office is just a short walk away. It will not take long, but it must be done." Ethan gave a stiff nod, as though the lawyer had confirmed something obvious. He glanced at me with barely concealed contempt, then turned on his heel and strode toward the doors. I followed, slower, my knees aching as I stood. The chapel emptied behind us, voices trailing into the cold afternoon air. The walk to Richard's office was only a few blocks through downtown Fort Collins. Storefronts glistened with polished glass, and the faint sound of traffic hummed from nearby streets. Ethan walked ahead with long strides, his phone already in his hand, sending messages with sharp flicks of his thumb. I trailed behind, feeling like a shadow, until we reached a tall brick building with an engraved brass plaque, "Cole and Associates." Inside, the office smelled of leather and old books. The reception area was quiet, the furniture heavy and expensive, the kind of place designed to remind visitors of power and permanence. We were led upstairs to a large room where Richard's desk waited beneath tall windows. Diplomas lined the wall, flanked by framed photographs of him shaking hands with local officials. Ethan sat quickly in the chair closest to the desk, his back straight, posture oozing confidence. I lowered myself into the other chair, my body heavy with the weight of years. Richard adjusted his glasses and placed a thick folder on the desk. His voice was calm, deliberate. "First, allow me to say that Clara Harris was not only a valued client, but someone I considered a friend. Her passing is a loss to many. However, her wishes were clear, and it is my duty to see them carried out exactly as she intended." Ethan leaned forward, his expression smug. "I am sure we will not have any trouble with that." Richard opened the folder, flipping to the first set of pages. His tone shifted into formal cadence, each word carrying the weight of law. "This is the last will and testament of Clara Harris, executed March 15th of last year, properly witnessed and notarized. It supersedes all prior wills." I felt my chest tighten. March 15th. That was just over a year ago. She had been alive and healthy then, still running her empire with unshakable resolve. What had made her decide to rewrite everything? Richard continued. To my beloved son, Ethan Harris, I leave the family residence at 214 Hillcrest Avenue, including all furnishings, artwork, and personal property within. In addition, I leave the sum of $500,000 to be transferred from my primary investment accounts within 60 days of probate. Ethan's lips curved into a satisfied smile. He sat taller, his chest swelling. I knew the house well. It was a mansion perched on the hillside, worth close to $1 million with its sweeping views and marble staircases. Combined with $500,000 in cash, it was enough to secure his comfort for years. Ethan exhaled slowly, as though the outcome had been exactly what he expected. But I saw it, the flicker at the corner of his smile. $500,000 was a fortune to most men. But to Ethan, who had grown up in wealth, who had tasted privilege since he was a boy, it was crumbs. He was calculating, already adding up the numbers in his head. Where was the rest? Where were the millions? Where was the company that had been Clara's crown jewel? Richard did not pause. He turned another page. These bequests come with conditions. The inheritance is contingent upon Ethan Harris remaining employed with Harris Consulting Solutions for a minimum of 2 years following the execution of this will, or until such time as the company is sold or dissolved. The smugness faltered. Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowing. Conditions? What kind of conditions are these? Why would my mother tie strings to my inheritance? Richard's expression remained neutral. These were her explicit wishes. She wanted you to continue working within the company for at least 2 years. That makes no sense, Ethan snapped. She would never expect me to prove myself like some junior associate. The company is mine by right. Everyone knows that. Nevertheless, Richard said evenly, these are the terms she established. They are legally binding. Ethan's jaw worked as he tried to compose himself. His fingers tapped against the armrest of his chair, and for the first time, I saw unease in his eyes. He had expected to step cleanly into Clara's empire, to claim it all without resistance. Now, he was being forced to remain under rules he did not set, in a company where his position might not be as untouchable as he believed. I sat quietly, saying nothing, though my mind churned. $500,000 and a mansion. It was more than I had ever seen in my life, more than I could ever dream of holding. Yet the number was still so far from the $40 million I knew Clara's empire was worth. I felt tension creep into the room, thickening the air with each passing second. Ethan broke the silence first. What about the company? What about her remaining assets? You are skipping the most important part. Richard adjusted his glasses, then closed the folder with deliberate calm. His eyes moved from Ethan to me, and then back again. We will get to that. Ethan leaned forward, his voice sharp with frustration. No. Let us hear it now. The investments, the business, everything she worked for. Where is the rest? Richard's gaze settled on me, and for the first time since we had entered the office, his tone softened slightly. He folded his hands atop the desk and said, Now we come to the major inheritance. Richard's words seemed to hang in the air, heavier than the ticking of the antique clock on the shelf behind him. He opened the folder again, turning several pages with slow, deliberate movements. My palms grew damp against the arms of my chair, though I had no reason to expect anything beyond a polite acknowledgement or a token bequest. Clara had been worth $40 million. That fortune belonged to Ethan. Everyone knew it. But then Richard cleared his throat and began to read. To my former husband, David Harris, I leave the sum of $33.5 million to be transferred from my primary investment, accounts and securities portfolio. The words hit me like a physical blow. My ears rang, and for a moment I thought I had misheard him. $33.5 million. The number sounded absurd, as if it had been plucked from someone else's life and dropped into mine by mistake. What did you just say? Ethan's voice cracked through the stunned silence, sharp and furious. Richard repeated it calmly, each syllable precise. $33.5 million to David Harris. I blinked, my mouth dry. There must be some mistake, I managed, my voice hoarse. I have not spoken to Clara in 15 years. Why would she? But Richard was not finished. He turned to the next page and continued. In addition, I transfer to David Harris controlling interest in Harris Consulting Solutions, including all subsidiaries, real estate holdings, and business assets. This includes 65% ownership of the corporation and an appointment as chairman of the board of directors. The room seemed to tilt. For a moment, I felt as though the floor had given way beneath me. My hands gripped the chair to steady myself. Controlling interest. The company that had consumed Clara's life, the company that had ended our marriage, the empire worth tens of millions. It was being handed to me. This is impossible, Ethan shouted, leaping to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward and clattered against the wall. His face flushed crimson, his eyes blazing. He pointed a trembling finger at me. He must have manipulated her. There is no other explanation. I shook my head quickly, panic rising in my chest. I did nothing. I have not seen your mother since the divorce. I swear it, Ethan. I did not even know she was sick, if she was sick at all. Liar, he spat, his voice breaking with rage. You convinced her somehow, when she was vulnerable. You preyed on her when she was weak. You poisoned her against me. Richard's calm voice cut through the chaos. That is not the case. I can assure you that Clara Harris was of completely sound mind when she signed this will. She underwent a full mental competency evaluation prior to execution, specifically to prevent challenges of undue influence or incapacity. Ethan slammed his fist against the desk, rattling papers. No, she would never give him everything. She spent her whole life building that company for me. This is fraud. I sat frozen, still reeling, barely able to process the enormity of what I had just been told. $33.5 million. Control of the company. It was absurd, unthinkable. My life until this moment had been defined by scarcity, by quiet survival. Now, in a single reading, it had been overturned by a woman who had once promised me forever, and who had chosen ambition over me. Why? The word tore itself out of me, barely more than a whisper. Why would she do this? Richard closed the will carefully, stacking the papers into a neat pile. His gaze moved from Ethan's furious face to my stunned one, then back again. Clara left instructions to explain her reasoning. She anticipated this would come as a shock to both of you. Ethan barked a laugh that held no humor, only bitterness. Instructions? What kind of instructions? She could not even explain this to me in person? After everything I sacrificed to live the life she wanted for me? She left him a fortune and left me scraps. You received significant assets, Richard said evenly. The family home, furnishings, and $500,000 represent more than most people will ever see in a lifetime. Do not give me that. Ethan roared, slamming his hand against the desk again. His composure was unraveling, his voice cracking. He gets $33 million and the company, and I get pocket change? She betrayed me. She betrayed her own son. Richard's voice stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened. She did not betray you. She made a deliberate choice, and she left a message for you both, to be read after the will. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. My hands shook against my knees. I wanted to tell Ethan again that I had not asked for any of this, that I would have lived out the rest of my days quietly on Maple Street, without ever imagining such a fortune could land at my feet. But the words lodged in my throat. Ethan turned his fury on me again, his voice trembling with betrayal. She hated you. She despised you. She told me you were holding her back, that you were weak. And now you expect me to believe she just handed you everything she built? Number this is your doing. Ethan, I said softly, forcing my voice past the tightness in my chest. I swear to you, I had no hand in this. Your mother made her choices without me. I never expected this. I never wanted this. Liar! He screamed again, his whole body shaking. You could never stand that I had her respect, that I was her legacy. You ruined her in life, and now you have ruined her in death. Richard raised a hand, his patience thinning. Enough, both of you. Clara knew this would be difficult, and she prepared for it. She left a personal message, written in her own hand, to be read after the provisions of the will. She wanted you both to hear it. Ethan's breathing came in sharp bursts, his fists clenched, his suit rumpled now from his outburst. His voice dropped, hoarse and full of grief disguised as fury. A message? She could not tell me herself. She had to put it on paper for him. Richard opened a drawer and withdrew a sealed manila envelope. On the front, written in Clara's elegant script, were 2 words: personal letter. He laid it carefully on the desk between us, his hand resting on it for a moment as though acknowledging its weight. Then he looked at each of us in turn, his eyes steady, his voice solemn. It is time you both heard what Clara had to say. He broke the seal and pulled out several pages of cream-colored stationery, unfolding them with deliberate care. Richard unfolded the pages slowly, the paper whispering in the quiet room. My chest tightened as I caught sight of Clara's familiar handwriting flowing across the cream-colored sheets. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. It felt as though she was in the room again, her presence filling the air, her voice about to emerge through Richard's lips. He cleared his throat, then began to read. My dearest David, if these words are being spoken, then I am gone. I can imagine you sitting stiffly in that chair, probably looking at Richard with suspicion, wondering if the entire world has lost its mind. I can almost see the look on your face, that expression you used to have when I rearranged the living room without warning, confused, a little frustrated, but trying to be polite about it. That memory still makes me smile. I felt the sting of tears rising, unbidden. She remembered. Even after everything, she remembered the small moments, the pieces of me I thought she had long since erased. Richard's voice continued, steady but gentle. David, I know this inheritance feels impossible. I know you are sitting there right now convinced there has been a mistake, that you do not deserve this money or the responsibility that comes with it. But you are wrong. You deserve every penny, and I am going to tell you why. My throat tightened. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to steady myself against the tide of emotion that threatened to drown me. I never stopped loving you. Not during our worst fights. Not during the long nights at the office. Not even during the divorce, though I convinced myself otherwise. I told the world I left because you held me back, because I needed more than you could give. The truth is, I left because I was afraid of being ordinary, afraid of failing, and so I chose ambition over love. I chose power over family. I was proud, stubborn, blind, and I hurt you in ways I will never forgive myself for. Richard's voice wavered slightly as he read those lines, but he steadied himself. I sat frozen, tears streaking my cheeks. For years I had carried the quiet shame of being not enough, of being the man who could not keep his wife, who could not match her ambition. And now, here she was, admitting she had never stopped loving me. Richard turned to the next page. David, you always valued people over profit. You worked hard at the plant, a job most would overlook. But you knew it mattered because it kept homes warm and lights on. You taught me, even if I did not want to hear it, that dignity comes from service, not status. I forgot those lessons when I drowned myself in wealth. I forgot them when I turned Ethan against you. But I never forgot you. I never stopped measuring men against the quiet strength you showed me every day. I pressed my trembling hands against my face. Her words cut deeper than any courtroom argument ever had, but instead of leaving wounds, they patched ones I thought would never heal. Then Richard's tone shifted. Ethan, my beautiful boy, if you are listening, you are angry. I know you. I can see the rage on your face. You think your father manipulated me. You think I lost my mind. But sweetheart, that is not the truth. The truth is, you are not ready. Not yet. You have lived your entire life in the shadow of what I built. You have enjoyed the benefits of money, but you have not learned the weight of responsibility. You have not had to build anything from nothing. You have not had to sacrifice. You have never been told no. And because of that, you do not yet understand what it means to truly succeed. Ethan's breathing grew louder beside me. I turned my head slightly. His jaw was clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. His hands shook, not with fear but with fury. Richard pressed on. Ethan, I gave you $500,000 in the family home because I love you. It is enough for you to live comfortably, to explore who you might become without the crushing weight of unlimited wealth. It is enough for you to build something of your own, to test yourself, to discover whether you can create rather than inherit. I did not give you the company because you are not ready to lead it. I did not give you millions because you must learn that character is built through effort, not entitlement. Ethan let out a bitter laugh, but it was strangled, cracked. His face had gone pale. Richard's voice softened. David, I gave you the company and the fortune because you never wanted it. You never craved power. You never measured yourself by wealth. You valued honesty, humility, loyalty, qualities I dismissed when I should have cherished them. I know you will not use this money to hurt people. I know you will not waste it trying to prove something. You will use it for good because that is who you are. That is why I trusted you with everything I built, because I know you will succeed where I failed. The room fell silent when Richard lowered the last page. For a long moment, none of us moved. I sat with tears drying on my cheeks, my chest aching with a mixture of grief and relief. Clara's voice lingered in the air, as though she were still with us, guiding us even after death. Ethan was the first to speak. His voice was low, dangerous, filled with venom. This is not over. He leaned forward, his eyes burning into me with a fury I'd never seen before. I will contest every word of this will." Ethan's snarl still hung in the air as his chair screeched back across the floor. He grabbed his coat with shaking hands and stormed toward the door, his polished shoes striking the hardwood like hammer blows. The slam of the door echoed through the office, leaving only silence behind. I sat frozen, the weight of Clara's letter heavy in my hands. My chest was tight, my throat dry, but beneath the storm of emotions, a strange calm was beginning to take root. I looked down at the pages, her handwriting curling across the paper, and realized this was the closest I would ever come to hearing her voice again. The woman I had loved, the woman who had once broken me, had given me something more valuable than money or titles. She had given me back my worth. Richard broke the silence. "Mr. Harris," I looked up. He was studying me with a steady expression, his tone professional but softer now. "I know this is overwhelming, but you must understand. Your wife's will is airtight. She anticipated challenges. She prepared for them. She underwent multiple evaluations, and I sat with her myself as she dictated her wishes. There's no legal ground for Ethan to stand on." "He will try," I murmured. "Yes," Richard agreed, "but try is all he can do. The courts will uphold this because she left no room for doubt. She wanted you to have this, David. Not just the money, not just the company. The responsibility." The word settled over me like a mantle I was not sure I was strong enough to carry. I rubbed my temples, trying to grasp the reality. $33.5 million. Control of Harris Consulting Solutions. I had spent my entire life balancing bills, clipping coupons, fixing leaky pipes, and now I was supposed to sit at the head of a table worth hundreds of millions. The thought made my stomach turn. "I am no businessman," I said quietly. Richard leaned forward, his eyes steady. "That may be exactly why she trusted you. She knew you would not abuse it. She knew you would not chase power for its own sake. And you will not be alone. The company has a strong management team. They will guide you while you learn. What matters is that you carry Clara's final wish. You honor what she entrusted to you." I nodded slowly. His words eased some of the fear, but they could not erase the weight. Still, when I glanced back at Clara's letter, at the lines where she admitted she had never stopped loving me, I felt something loosen inside me. For years I had carried shame like a shadow, convinced I had been nothing but a failure in her eyes. But now I knew. She had seen me, even at the end. She had remembered the man I was, the man she once believed in. I stood, the letter trembling in my hand. Richard rose too, offering a firm handshake. "Take some time. Let it sink in. We will schedule meetings to discuss the transition. For now, go home. Rest." I nodded, though I doubted I would rest. I folded Clara's letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my jacket pocket, as though it were made of glass. Then I walked out of Richard's office, my steps unsteady but lighter than they had been in years. The sunlight outside was sharper than I remembered, almost blinding. I squinted, lifting a hand to shield my eyes. For the first time in decades, I felt as though I was walking into something new rather than limping away from something broken. I stood there for a long moment on the steps, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. I thought about Clara, about the diner where we met, about the September day we married under golden skies, about the nights when laughter filled our tiny kitchen, about the fights, the silence, the divorce papers, the years of absence. I thought about Ethan, my boy, my son, twisted by ambition, poisoned by entitlement. I thought about the man he had become and the man I had failed to reach. And yet, I also thought about the chance Clara had given me. Not just to inherit her wealth, but to rebuild something she had destroyed. Not money, not status, but meaning. She had given me back the dignity she had once stripped away. She had given me the chance to serve again in a way that mattered. I started down the steps, each one steadier than the last. For years, I had lived in silence, my life defined by absence. Now, I carried more than I could ever have imagined. More money, more power, more responsibility. But the greatest gift was not the fortune. It was her final words. It was knowing that love, even when broken, had never truly died. And yet, as I reached my car and slid into the driver's seat, the calm I felt was pierced by the echo of Ethan's last words. His voice had been filled with fury, with betrayal, with the kind of determination that did not fade easily. This is not over. I will contest every word of this will. I gripped the steering wheel, staring out at the road ahead. The sun was shining, but the shadow of his words lingered. I knew then that my fight was not finished. Clara had given me fortune, but Ethan had given me a promise of his own, one that would test every ounce of strength I still had. If you liked this story, please subscribe and tell us about your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next one, click on the box on the screen.